Okay, so I'm now recording. So we're just going to go through some charts that Craig has been putting together as part of this public data analysis project that we're doing around this pandemic. So without further ado, I'm going to get started. So we're going to look at country comparisons first, Craig. So why don't you cover this quickly? This is a chart that you've been keeping track of and adding data to regularly, right?
Yeah. So this chart shows a comparison of multiple countries over an elapsed time since each of them, since the pandemic or the number of cases hit each country. So it's not related to the calendar. It's just when each country started to see infections. And
Okay.
this is, per capita. So it's the chart of the number of cases per million population. So you can see that down at the bottom there, Australia in orange, they flattened the curve early within 20 days of seeing a lot of cases. Same with South Korea and China, although the data from China is debatable.
Yeah.
And you can see Canada is not as good as Australia, but we're not as bad as Italy in the US and Spain comparatively over the first 60 days of the virus being in the country.
So this has been over 60 days, and so we're looking at just under 2,000 cases per million people in Canada. Is that the way to interpret that?
Just something like 1,800, something like that, cases per million population. So you can see that we are endeavoring to flatten the curve. It's not flat yet, but you can see Canada's doing okay. US is still pointed upward. They're worse off than Italy in terms of the number of cases per capita, and not quite as bad as Spain. But if they don't get their act together, they could be as bad as Spain in the next while.
Yeah. Let's head over to the next one. So what's this one about?
This is the same data. It's just on the logarithmic scale. So you can see that on the vertical axis on the left, it's not a linear scale. It multiplies by 10 with each grid line, just to sort of be able to show a different view of the curves flattening in the same view.
Okay. And how's this one?
This is a similar thing. It's just what it shows is the total cases in each country is the solid line, and then the dotted line is the number of active cases. And so as the number of total cases, the increase in the total cases slows, then the country goes into recovery mode and the number of active cases decreases over time. And if you compare Germany's an interesting case study in black there. They flattened the curve kind of around the 30-day mark. They started to flatten the curve around 30 to 40 days.
Yes.
And then the number of active cases went into, the country kind of went into recovery mode.
Yeah.
And same with Australia in orange, and Hong Kong in pink. And South Korea in green. It's interesting, Canada and the U.S. What's happening there is although we have been starting to flatten the curve, we're not flattening it as fast as Germany and Australia did. So that's why the active cases is not decreasing yet. I don't think we've peaked in the number of active cases. We're close to the peak, I hope, but we haven't peaked yet there.
That's these ones here and here. Yeah, that makes
sense. The dotted line in the red is the active cases in Canada. And so we need the new cases per day to slow faster so that the country can go into recovery mode.
And then there's some charts here that we can drill in with that in mind, right? So if we look at Canada, what have we got here?
So this is over the past a little over a month, from April 5th through May 8th. It's the gray line is the number of daily tests completed in Canada. and you'll see more about this in a minute, but it's trending up over the last month. And the red bar chart at the bottom is the number of new daily cases.
Okay.
So it's sort of flat. You can see that although it has been improving over the last couple of weeks, which we'll show on the next slide, it hasn't been, the number of new daily cases hasn't been decreasing fast enough for the active cases curve to slow, which I talked about in the last slide.
Okay, so this one here, so for example, I guess yesterday we had 29,535 tests
Mm-hmm.
and then 1,512 confirmed cases.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what do we have here? This is 14 days.
Yeah, this is the same chart. It's just a shorter time frame. It's the last 2 weeks, which sort of coincides with what they say is the estimated incubation period for the virus. But more so, it's the public health authorities say that they want to see a consistent decrease in the number of new cases over a 14-day period in order to reopen safely. Now, they do want to see, in a particular region, they want to see under 200 new cases per day in order to be really safe about reopening. But countrywide, I haven't really heard them say the number 200. I don't know what the daily new cases benchmark is
Well, that would be
in
interesting to
Canada.
know. Yeah.
But over the last 2 weeks, testing has increased, trended up, and
Yeah.
the daily new cases over the last 2 weeks has trended down slightly. It's still sort of a plateau, but it has trended down slightly.
Yeah, that's a great chart. So what do we got here?
So this is in Canada. The solid line is the total number of cases, and it's still going up linearly over time. This is, the horizontal axis is 100 days from the start of the first 50 cases in Canada. The the bar chart at the bottom is what you saw a minute ago, the daily new cases,
Right.
which it has basically plateaued, but it's sort of decreasing over the last couple of weeks, as you can see.
And there's a little bit, then the trend line is sort of emphasizing that.
Yeah. And then the dotted line is the active cases curve. And it looks like we might be close to plateauing there. I hope we are.
Yeah.
And if we can get the daily new cases to decrease, obviously without decreasing testing, then the active cases curve should start to, we should see the backside of that curve, hopefully, if we
Well,
can slow down the daily new cases.
that's a great chart. So we take a look at US.
Yeah, same thing in the US, that the daily new cases at the bottom,
Yeah.
they were on fire, 38 days, 40 days into it, but they've turned a corner, and over time their daily new cases has been decreasing very slowly.
Yeah.
It's sort of a plateau, but it has been trending down a bit.
Yeah.
Same story now, although they haven't been trending down as fast as we have. So their active cases curve, the dotted line, they haven't really come close to reaching the peak of active cases.
Yeah.
So they're not yet in recovery mode. It's interesting that they seem to be reopening more aggressively, more quickly than we are, and they're still on the upward trend for active cases, which is a bit scary.
Yeah.
And this, in the US, this is the daily testing numbers in the gray line, which is trending up generally, certainly in the last couple or few weeks. And the daily new cases is trending down slightly. So that's good news.
Yeah. And this is what, over a month period?
Yeah.
And this is a 4 weeks?
Yeah, the same 2-week period. So testing trending up over the last couple of weeks, but as you can see, the daily new cases is plateaued over the last couple of weeks.
Right, which is what made you a bit concerned or
yeah. Well, that's why they're not in recovery mode, right? They haven't entered recovery mode yet. They're still going up. Now, it could be worse. The daily testing could be going up, and the daily new cases could be going up too.
True.
Commensurate. So they are starting to, perhaps the virus is starting to slow down a bit in the country because daily new cases is consistently at the same level, even though testing's going up.
Yeah. Okay, so where you've got some charts for Ontario and Quebec, so let's drill into those.
Yeah, Ontario and Quebec. This is because Canada is so heavily influenced by Ontario and Quebec. Ontario and Quebec have something like 86% of the total cases in Canada. So
Mm,
I've been watching what's happening in those provinces because that influences the Canada-wide numbers that we just looked at.
yeah.
And yeah, so this is just the total cases comparison between the two. Ontario has almost 20,000 cases as of yesterday, and Quebec, they hadn't updated their numbers yet this morning, but they're at roughly 37,000, almost twice as many cases as Ontario.
Okay.
This is Ontario's same similar view of the Canada and the US numbers that we looked at. This is
Right.
testing, daily testing in gray. So yesterday, the number's missing there, but it was about 19,000, a little over 19,000 case tests, which is the best, the most testing so far in Ontario.
Yeah.
The good news is that you can see in the bottom in green, the daily new cases has been trending down for the last couple weeks
Yeah.
as testing has been trending up. And the
Yeah.
next slide will show you that view of the last couple weeks
Yeah.
in particular. So this
And
is the
this,
last 2 weeks. Sorry, go
well, I was
ahead.
just this is what I like about this one here. I was going to ask you about the previous one, but what I like about this one is you've actually put the trend line here, which this is one of my favorite charts because it very quickly will tell me over the next 2 weeks, and I know you'll explain this further, but testing's up, and new cases are trending down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I'd like to see, obviously, we'd all like to see the daily new cases trending down faster.
Yeah,
And, but it's good news anyway.
yeah. Anything else you want to add to that, or?
No, I think that's it. There's more to come in other slides. So this is interesting for me. This is the solid line is the total cases in Ontario over time. The bar chart at the bottom is the daily new cases that you've just seen. And then the dotted line is the active cases chart. And so because over the last couple of weeks or a couple of weeks ago, the daily new cases started to trend down a bit, which meant that the province could start to go into recovery mode in the active cases. But just in the last 5 days or so, there was a little uptick over the past week,
Yeah.
which basically slowed the recovery in the active cases.
Well, and we have over close to 2 months worth of data here, right? Because it started on the March 15th, April 15th. Another week or so, it will be exactly 2 months worth of data, which, and just help me sort this out in my own mind. When you think about 14 days, which is the incubation period, like how does your mind work in interpreting this chart?
Well, if you go back to the previous 14 days, so 14 days ago, between 14 days ago and now, is the incubation period. So I don't know, that's a good question.
Okay, well, we'll keep thinking. We'll keep moving on. Do you want to, anything else you want to say about this chart?
No, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how the active cases behaves over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Just a worthy of note is back on March 5th, March 15th is roughly when the province, when everything got shut down.
Right. Okay. That's good to know. And so we're on to Quebec now, right?
Yeah. Like I said, because Ontario and Quebec heavily influence the Canadian numbers, I wanted to look at both provinces individually. So over the
Yeah.
last month, testing has been pretty flat in Quebec, except for the last few days. It's the jury's out for me on how they're doing. I do think they're in a bit of, it's on fire in Quebec right now still. The
Yeah.
testing numbers over the last few days were high and then decreased, and then daily new cases didn't decrease at the same rate as the testing numbers over the last few days.
I think you've
I'm
got it.
concerned about Quebec.
And here's the 14-day.
Yeah, the last 14 days. So although it's been trending up, heavily influenced by 3 days ago,
Yeah.
it's been basically flat. So I don't know what I think about this. I'm definitely concerned about Quebec.
Yeah. And
And that's the same view. It's the daily new cases at the bottom plateaued or increased slightly over time. And that's why the active cases in Quebec, they're not going into, similar to the US, they haven't entered recovery mode because
yeah, so if we went back to the Ontario one, it's starting to flatten a bit.
yeah, we peaked a while back, and number of active cases has been decreasing in Ontario.
Yeah.
Yeah, Quebec still hasn't peaked in terms of the number of active cases, which is
Yeah.
concerning.
Do we have any other? I think that's the last chart. Anything you want to just sum up based on this presentation?
I because I live in Ontario, I'd be tempted to go back to the awesome looking Ontario chart and celebrate the last couple of weeks.
This one here?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's good. So, and hopefully we see this continue. And thanks for all the work you're doing in sharing this information and most importantly, interpreting it and sort of manipulating it so that we can get some insights and,
My pleasure. I don't like surprises, so
nor
this
do
is
I.
why I want to try to see how we're doing and what the future holds for us.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot. Appreciate it, Craig. I'm going to have to
You're
close
welcome,
off. So
Chris.
we'll talk to you later.
Yeah. Okay.